It's live.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to round number 19 of the WBC Talks. Stay home, stay safe. This is going to be the round 19 with boxing talk. We're going to talk a lot of boxing here, and we have people that it's been in boxing for how many years? I cannot make numbers right now, but first I want to introduce 𝗧𝗔𝗟𝗡𝗗. She's the director of the WBC University. 𝗧𝗔, welcome.
Hi, Victor. Hi, Mauricio, and hi to all our guests today. Well, as you say, we are in round 19 of these WBC talks. Last week, we had many amazing panels, and the schedule for this week promised us to have some also great panels. So I can wait until it's Friday again and to listen to all the planning we have for this week. Today, I'm going to comment about the importance of our attitude. I will share with you the importance of managing a positive state of mind. The state of mind is the attitude or disposition that we all have on an emotional level. People, or we are not always aware, the most of the time, we're not conscious if we are in a good mood or in a bad mood, but the others do look at us if we are in a good mood. When we are in a bad mood, things doesn't seem to work. And because of that, it is very important to learn to identify how do you feel, and also not only how you feel, how your gestures and your postures affect your attitude, and how they become facilitators of your emotions. We have to take care of our gestures and also be conscious of our mood. If we are grimacing, it says that we are in a bad mood. If our gesture is very hard and we express that with ourselves, we are demonstrating that we are in a bad mood. But if we detect that we are doing that, and then we make an effort and we'll say, oh, I'm in a bad mood, then I need to smile right now. And just because of that you smile, that change in a second. If you right now think for a second, how do you feel right now? Can you identify how did you wake up this morning? Happy, sad, angry? What happened to you today? And if you detect that you're in a bad mood with a bad attitude, change it. You can do that. I just told you by training, and you can train that, but being conscious about it, putting a smile on yourself, have a powerful phrase. We've talked about this before. Just be aware of that and take conscious. If we do that, then we're gonna guarantee that we're gonna have a great day. Thank you very much, and let's enjoy the panel.
Thank you, 𝗧𝗔. Now I want to introduce Mauricio Suleiman, president of the WBC. Mauricio, your microphone.
Chuck, smile. Now you feel better, huh?
Very early for Chuck.
I'm very
good,
happy,
man.
very happy to see three of such an important members of the boxing community. Ed Brophy, the man who has dedicated his life to remember the great ones in the sport through the International Boxing Hall of Fame. You're a dear friend. Dino Duba, so many years our families have had a great relationship. You enjoyed a great relationship with my father and the Suleimans, and it's very good to see you. And Chuck, what can I say about Chuck? I just cannot wait to hear the stories. So just for you to know, I don't know if you know WBC Talks. It's the intention to spend an hour between friends, say whatever you want to say, enjoy, share anecdotes, share stories, and let people who are watching enjoy, learn, and entertain during these difficult times. So thank you very much. And I cannot just wait to sit down and hear you talking. Thank you.
Thank you, Mauricio.
Thank you, Mauricio. And I first want to introduce Ed Brophy, president of the International Boxing Hall of Fame in 𝗥𝗢𝗨𝗡𝗗. It's an amazing, amazing place where there's a lot of things happening there. I have a lot of these things.
Yes.
This,
Great.
And then Chiquita signed it too. So I have both signatures, and I have Willie Pep. Well, I have a lot of these things. Ed, how are you?
Beautiful. Those are great pieces you've got, and great fighters. Wow. We talk about great fighters in the history of boxing. You just showed two of them. So everything's good here in 𝗥𝗢𝗨𝗡𝗗 for all reasons concerned. It's so great to be with you.
Thank you. Now, Chuck Williams, he's been in boxing for since 1927, you said?
Are you crazy?
Chuck Williams from Brooklyn.
No, actually, I was born in Manhattan.
Go ahead, Chuck.
Sorry, Victor. I was born in Manhattan, and I'm the only New Yorker that I've met, and Dino might relate to this, that lived in all 5 boroughs. So I think I'm sure there must be 1, 2, 3, 4 others, but that's pretty unique. But I am a dyed-in-the-wool New Yorker. I've lived half my life in Hawaii, moved here in 1976, but I'm always be a New Yorker in my heart. And I started in boxing, actually. Mauricio asked me about 2 years ago, we were in a conversation, and he said, Chuck, how long have you been in boxing? And I said, gee, I never even thought about that. And I said, damn. He goes, what? I said, I had my first fight in an orphanage in New York in 1944, meaning that this year I will have 76 years in boxing. And I mean involved, because I had over 300 fights in the orphanage. You had to climb the stairs. I mean, it was survival. Poor Black kids, poor Latino kids, and poor white kids. Many of us thrown away by our families. So we're dealing with a lot of stuff that we didn't realize what we're dealing with. And I played every sport, football, basketball, baseball, ran track. And they wanted us to keep our minds off of our life circumstance at that time. But I'm glad I had that life circumstance, because it's made me who I am. And could have got have experience. And at the age of 17, was a medic there. And I trained at the age of 19. I trained a all-Navy welterweight and heavyweight champion. And then back home, after some years, I started officiating the amateurs, did as many as 5 national tournaments in 1 year, including the Olympic trials each year. And the Olympic trials every 4 years, of course. And then I got involved with another organization for my first fight, which I did in the Philippines. And then lo and behold, I attended NABF convention. I'll make this quick if I can. NABF convention in Norfolk. And then decided that in New Orleans, it was about a week later, and I was living in Hawaii at the time. And so I walk in and I see all these people surrounding this short, chubby guy. I said to myself, who the heck is this guy? So I asked somebody, so that's 𝗧𝗟𝗡𝗏, the president of the World Boxing Council. So I waited for people to clear out, and then I walked and introduced myself and told them I was an official from Hawaii, and asked if we might break bread while we're in New Orleans. So Jose said yes, and I gave him my phone number. He called a couple of times, and finally he left a message on my hotel phone and said, Chuck, I'm so sorry. I have to go back to Mexico, but the next time we are together, I promise we will have a meal. And that's how my journey through my boxing life with a very, very, very special friend 𝗧𝗔𝗟𝗡𝗗 started.
Thank you, Chuck. Now let me introduce someone that was born in a boxing family too, Dino Duba. Dino, matchmaker, Rock Nation, many things around boxing. You've been there almost forever too.
Yes, it feels like it, Victor. Thank you. It's just so great to be here. I'm honored that I was able to join the talk today. I've been following all the previous ones, and I think it's a wonderful thing that Mauricio, yourself, and the entire WBC is going. It's very important during this tough time to stay connected with your friends and your associates, and just to stay in the loop. I'm sure everybody's suffering with cabin fever right now, and I think it's really, really good to stay connected like this, and I'm honored. I was born into the business. Had no choice. I actually early on in my high school career, I actually had dreams of being a engineer, airplane pilot. But at one point before I graduated high school, my father made it clear there's nothing to talk about. I'm going into the family business, and it's been I wouldn't have traded it for the world. Let me put it that way. There's always some ups and downs in this business. It's just the nature of the business, but it to me, it's the most wonderful sport in the world. The athletes, the boxers, who this business revolves around, are the most special athletes in the world. And I respect all athletes, but the one thing that never changes is the heart and special character that boxers have and need to have in order to pursue their occupation. And I see Mauricio, makes me feel old, because I remember Mauricio used to come as a little child to the fights, and it's kind of scary how long I've been in the business, but again, I wouldn't have changed it for the world. And there's so many great things that happen. One thing I wanted to mention to you, Victor, is you made a big mistake showing Ed Brophy those memorabilia you have. He's going to be relentless. He's already probably got it marked down in his reminders to go after you for it. So, that was a mistake.
This Willie Pep.
Oh my God! Oh
You
my
see?
God!
It's incredible.
And look, my dear friend Chuck, we've had so many good times together, memories, and obviously being from New York originally, he and I always had great stories. It's amazing that he's gone to Hawaii and been there so long. I'm jealous. New York is great, but being in a place like Hawaii, that would be a wonderful thing.
So let's hear the first story, Dino.
Well, obviously during times of this, you have a lot of time to reflect, but I think because of this is your forum, I really want to, I've thought about my experiences with the WBC, yourself, obviously your father, who I loved on a personal level, regardless of the up and downs you have in this business. Sometimes things go your way, sometimes they don't, because that's just the nature of the business. You can't please everyone. But I always respected and loved Don Jose, and he was always a friend to me, even through the ups and downs of the business. And I was thinking about a funny story, and I was thinking about, we did a fight in 2008. I don't know if you were there, Mauricio. It was the Vitaly Klitschko-St. World Heavyweight Championship fight in Berlin.
Yes.
It was a great event. It was a very historic event. It's when Vitaly won the championship back and became the first time two brothers were the heavyweight champions at the same time. But I remember we were sitting in the first row of the show. Me, Don Jose, and Don King, who me and Don did the show together. I had Sam Peter, and Don was involved, and then we made the fight. And for anyone who's been
First of all, we have this picture.
There you go. There you go. Yeah, Don was trying to push me out of that picture, but I wouldn't let him. But, anyone who's been in Germany, you're probably aware there's a street food called currywurst. I don't know if you've ever been there, but they have these street stands, and currywurst is basically, you know, German form of sausage or hot dog. And they serve it in these little paper containers. And it's very sloppy. You know, it's like walking up to a New York hot dog stand and getting a hot dog with onions. You know, you dribble it all over your shirt. But we were sitting in the first row at the show, and I know we were in the center on camera. Me, Jose was in the middle, and Don was on the other side. And someone brought us 3 trays of the currywurst. And, you know, it's very sloppy with the sauce. You know, you dip the hot dog with your fingers in the sauce and eat it. And we're sitting there eating it right before the main event, I think it was. And it was on TV. It had to be. And the 3 of us, we all dripped the sauce on our shirts. And I remember everybody talking about it. The 3 of us are sitting in the first row, me, Jose, and Don. We all had currywurst stains on our suits. And it was right when we were on TV, and everybody was talking about it. It was really, really comical. But, you know, there's so many great stories. And, you know, I remember, you know, on a more serious note, but it was serious back then, but it became funny years later. You know, we did the classic fight, Julio Cesar Chavez versus Pernell Whitaker. Me, my company, my family, and Don, obviously, with the WBC. And, you know, I'll never forget, it was in the Alamo Dome in San Antonio, 65,000 people. It was sold out. You know, obviously 90% Mexican-American fans. And everybody who was in boxing and knows boxing knows, you know, what a great and important fight that was. It was for the pound-for-pound best fighter in the world. They were both clearly the 2 best fighters in the world, legends, undefeated. And, you know, the fight, unfortunately, was a decision that, you know, from our side, Pernell Whitaker's side, we weren't happy with. You know, a lot of people thought Pernell won the fight, but it ended up being a draw. And I'll never forget, after the fight, I was obviously upset at the decision. A lot of people were, and we were talking about it. And I'll never forget, Don Jose came up to me and he said, "Dino, you seem upset, and I understand why." I said, "Yeah, Jose, you know, it was a tough one. This was such an important fight. You know, he clearly won the fight, you know, and it's not even worth going over that." And I'll never forget the words Jose said to me. He said, "You know what? I'm sorry that this happened. These things happen in boxing sometime. I do acknowledge that Pernell should have gotten the decision, but at least he didn't get the loss." And when Don Jose said that to me, you know, kind of, I didn't know what to do. I was upset at the fight and everything. But then he said to me something that I remember to this day. He said, "You have my word that you will always be a friend of the WBC. And I will always try to do what's best for you, your fighters. And please don't let this damage our relationship, because I know how upset you are and how important it was." I said, "Okay, Jose, I appreciate that." And you know what? From that day on, again, you can't keep everybody happy in this business. There's always people that are happy about something, not happy about it. That's just the way the business and sport is. But from that day on, I always felt like Don Jose cared, treated me like a friend, treated me with respect, always tried to do the right thing. And, you know, back then, it was upsetting what happened, but thinking about it now, when he said, well, at least he didn't get the loss and his record's still undefeated, you know, thinking back now was kind of funny. But I'll never forget how he showed me friendship going forward, and right up until the last time I saw him. And you know, it meant a lot to me. It meant a lot to me. This is a tough business, tough sport. The sanctioning organizations, obviously, the WBC has been right at the forefront and on top for many, many years. It's tough to please everybody, but the most important thing for people to know is that, you know, you get the respect and treated fairly as much as possible. And, you know, the consideration of the fighters is always the priority. And I always got that feeling from Don Jose and now Mauricio too. And I appreciate their friendship.
Thank you, Dino. Ed, you haven't told us, how did you get involved in boxing?
Well, I got involved in boxing when I was very young. I fell in love with boxing maybe when I was about 7 or 8 years old. And what happened was, on a given day, I always remember a pair of boxing gloves just appeared as big as can be in front of me. I remember I was standing, and it was kind of like I just fell in love with boxing. I don't know how that image came in my mind, but I fell in love with boxing when I was about 7, 8 years old. And I was around a boxing town. Everybody admired Carmen Basilio, who fought in the 50s and retired in early 60s. And your father, your uncles, they went to see Carmen fight. So they were still talking about, Carmen, as I was, it was in the 1960s when I fell in love with boxing, and they were still talking about Carmen. Carmen was our hometown hero. And when I was with my parents and went into the diner for breakfast, and Carmen would walk in, it was like, wow, you're your hometown hero. And he sat next to you. And it was like, it was wonderful to have a hero in your hometown. And I just started going up to the gym and hanging around, and I loved every part of it. And my neighbor at the time, when I was growing up, was Billy Backus. And Billy was working his way up in the top 10 and got himself positioned at about number 3 and got a world title shot. And I would go to his fights and sit ringside in this corner. And I was a young kid, 12, 13 years old, and had every great opportunity to go into the dressing room and watch the reporters afterwards, question him, watch the managers and trainers, what they were doing in the dressing room before the fight. And it was a great opportunity because you really got to understand the trainers, the writers, the promoters. I always remember Tony Graziano, the great, Canastota, upstate New York promoter, who promoted so many fights in the 60s and 70s. And I watched him and learned from him that, as Dino would relate to this, is you put on a show and you're selling so many tickets in advance. It's not enough tickets. You're hoping to get a walking crowd. And when the first bout's ready to go, the promoter's looking out the front door to see how the parking lot looks, if it looks like there's gonna be more cars coming in. So you kind of learned everything from being around the sport. So I was so fortunate and fell in love with the game, and just had that great relationship with boxing. And as years went on, I did a little amateur boxing, because if you hang around the boxing gym, the next thing is you got to work out, and the next thing is you got to get in that ring. So had a few amateur fights, about 11 of them, and that was a great experience, because you kind of learned, what the fighter's thinking and what the managers are thinking, what they're telling you, and what it's like to be in that gym. And the best gyms in the world, or the gyms I say, are the ones that the water's leaking in the showers, and everything's worn out. Those are the most beautiful gyms. And if you've been around that, you know what I'm talking about. And so I was around that gym and had some amateur fights. And then later on, I started training some amateurs, and I wanted to do a little promoting myself. So I'd rent the Syracuse War Memorial and put on some pro boxing shows, and got the feel for what it's like to try to make it happen, try to bring in a crowd, and work with managers and trainers and matchmakers, and see the matchmakers stay up until 3 a.m. trying to put a fight together. And 48 hours before a fight, as Dino would relate to, is that it falls apart and you're trying to put it back together again. So I was fortunate. I grew up and had all those different aspects. And the Canastota had 2 world champions, Carmen Basilio, Billy Backus, and another ranking welterweight, 𝗥𝗢𝗨𝗡𝗗, who just passed away. And he was in the top 10. So we were fortunate in Canastota. We loved boxing, a long history of it. And then in 1984, the village said, let's make something special happen for boxing. Boxing's been good to the village. Nowhere in the world is there a place that boxing is honored in a way like Cooperstown does it for baseball, and Canton, Ohio does it for football, and so on down the list. So we got behind a microphone and put our hearts behind that microphone and said, let's try to make something happen for the sport. And then we purchased some property, did some fundraising, got a lot of volunteers involved. In 1989, the doors were open, and the first class of inductees 1 year later, Muhammad Ali, all the greats there, Ike Williams, Jake LaMotta, Billy Kahn, you name them, the greats were all there. And it was a special day. And I always remember when they were being introduced up to the stage, and Muhammad Ali was called, and he started walking up this stage, and I'm saying, well, this is it. This is the real. This is everything. The first class of inductees, and it's official now, and that put a big stamp on the Boxing Hall of Fame for the credibility, and from there went on to the 5th year anniversary and 10th and so on, and some great years. 30th anniversary was last year, and so many volunteers, and so much. It was all because of the love of Canastota, and Canastota has that deep love and just loves to pay tribute to the sport of boxing. And
what can you tell us about this picture?
That picture there, that was early on, and that was 1990, and Muhammad Ali for his induction. Prior to it, the induction ceremony, and we both looked good in that picture, and so
Very young.
that was a fun day, a fun memory, and and this one here with this is
I knew that Dino would love this picture too.
Yeah, this is a great one. This is his father being inducted that particular year, and Purnell comes along with him, of course, and Trinidad was in town, and we took this picture, and I remember Dino. I remember to this day that Dino during that weekend was negotiating to put that fight together, and I remember that, and that fight came about, and it's like I remember him doing his negotiating. Dino was among the best, and so that was a great weekend, great memory, and I always think about Dino that negotiating and trying to put that fight together, and so a lot of great memories. And Canastota loves boxing, and I've been fortunate. I was born and raised in this small village, and a lot of good things. And I just want to bring up about 𝗧𝗔𝗟𝗞𝗦 because Dino did, and I'd like to also, is that during this time when we're all trying to spend our time productively and get things done and try to figure things out, because we're all trying to figure things out, and that's financially, it's how to, in our case, keep a museum going and all the things we're trying to do. But in between that, you're organizing some of your files because you got a little time, you're trying to organize things. So it was just, I've been doing that. And last night I was going through some files, and I pulled out some papers that I wanted to kind of organize and let some be kind of thrown away and some hold on to. And the ones I held on to, it was interesting. It was in the early 90s, around 92, letters from Jose, the WBC, saying how they believed in the Hall of Fame. They had their commitment to the Hall of Fame, and they were financially supporting the Hall of Fame. And, I kept those letters from early on in the early 90s. And WBC has been with us right from the beginning and made nice contributions over the years. And, that has helped Canastota preserve the history of boxing. So thanks to the memory of Jose deep in our hearts. And so I've been fortunate, been around boxing, been around some of the greatest people like Jose and the WBC family. And it's great to be just talking today about these memories.
Thank you, Ed. What is the funniest or the strangest thing you remember in boxing? Who want to go?
Well, I myself, I don't know if I can come up with a funny one, because there's a lot of different occasions where, things get a little crazy and a little bit funny, but memorable. With each induction year, there's so many great speeches and so many that are emotional and pouring from the heart what boxing meant to them in their career. And for me, those are highlights, and just will always be remembered. And to see the family members there and fans smiling. So I have a lot of great memories of the champions who put in so much into their career and their speeches. So a lot of great speeches over the years by these inductees. And those are the great moments that I think are great. A little funny one, I don't know if it's funny or not, but I'll share this, is during, everybody's got a good night's sleep to have for their induction on Sunday to deliver their speech. And I remember 𝗥𝗢𝗨𝗡𝗗, he liked to have some good times, and there was a little dancing going on in Graziano's restaurant, and then after parties on Saturday night. But Sunday he had to be up early, but he wasn't going to get up early because he stood up real late. And in the morning we let him know, Alexis, you've got to get moving along. You had a good time last night, but your induction ceremony, you got to be ready for your speech. So we had to push him along. But boy, when he got on that bandstand to deliver his speech, it was one of the best. So we always remember how there was a little push that morning because he had a good time that night, as a lot of celebrities do. But 𝗥𝗢𝗨𝗡𝗗, one of the greats for sure.
Chuck. Give us a story. I know you've been around in many situations.
Yeah, I mean, listening to Ed, all those fighters that he mentioned, I've either seen them in person or refereed them in the ring, like Pernell Whitaker in the amateurs up in Colorado Springs at the Olympic Training Center. And it's appropriate, I think, with with Dino on to tell a quick story. I've attended at least half of the IBHOF's annual induction, and I don't think there's too many people come further than I do to attend that. So I used to get my 2 minutes of fame representing the WBC, and for a number of years I followed Lou Duva, and Lou Duva is one of the pardon me, is one of the great characters I think ever in boxing. Great guy and always friendly, obviously a great trainer. So I got up one year and I didn't follow Duva. So I usually start off by saying, my annual trip to small town USA. And I want to congratulate you folks on the great job you do. The whole town turns out, blah, blah, blah. And I said, and thank God, for the first time in a long time, I'm not following Lou Duva. Because Lou had this great ability to tell jokes. And I don't tell jokes. So anyway, he was a tough guy to follow and a wonderful, wonderful man. And Eddie, please tell Dickie's widow that I send my sincere condolences. The guy that was from the very beginning. And I'm really going to miss him on future trips.
I sure will.
Thank you.
Dino, any?
Well, you know, I have one comment to make to Chuck. I appreciate your story about my father. But you were a little off when you said my father was always friendly. When sometimes he wasn't so friendly in the corner. To me,
he was always friendly.
Well, he always loved you. And look, outside of the ring, you know, look, boxing was his blood, and that would never change. But one thing he always did was when he was in a fighter's corner, he would fight to the end on their behalf. And, you know, sometimes he got into some ruckuses in the ring. And it reminded me of a time when we had a fight, someone who actually passed away recently, Roger Mayweather, Floyd's uncle. We did this in Las Vegas. Roger Mayweather against this Italian fighter.
Vinny Paz.
Yeah, you remember.
Vinny
Pazienza. And look, Vinny Pazienza was a tough kid, a lot of heart and everything, and he would never give up, always keep fighting. Roger was, you know, world champion quality fighter. So it was a tough fight, but, you know, Vinny lasted the distance. You know, it was a wonderful, exciting fight. And after the fight was over, I'm not sure what round it was. I think it was at the end of the fight.
11.
After the bell rang, Vinny and Roger were still going at it. So my father rushed into the ring. You know, he always liked to get in the middle of things, and he tried to bust them up. And as he was rushing forward, Roger hit him with a right hand on his chin. It's a great right hand. Roger Mayweather, for those of you who knew him, he had a great right hand. And my father walked right into a right hand from Roger. And
he cut him up.
Yeah, he got a big cut under his eye and everything, but he didn't go down. And he always used to like to brag how he didn't go down from a right hand from Roger Mayweather. He stumbled around a little bit, but he didn't go down. And he was always proud of that.
That's a good story.
God, you know,
he got hit with a cell phone.
Oh my God. Yeah. Well, that was another time, but that was an ugly time in boxing. The riot at Madison Square Garden. God,
were you there?
Oh,
Bowie.
Yeah, it was our show. We did it together with Rock Newman, who was Riddick Bowe's promoter.
Right.
And it was a very scary time. You know, however it happened. There's nothing you can do about it. But I remember right in the middle of the riot in the ring, my father was in the middle of it as usual, throwing punches, getting hit, but then he just collapsed. He collapsed and fell backwards, spread eagle on the canvas, and he was out. to be quite honest, we thought he was dead. And, you know, I started rushing to the ring with a friend of mine who was there with me. And we dragged him out underneath the ropes by his arms. And he still wasn't moving. We really thought it was over. And they got him on a stretcher. And the paramedics in the garden, they had no way of getting out because the tunnels were blocked with the riot and everything. So they had to carry my father out on a stretcher up the stairs in the garden to go to another exit. And the HBO camera followed them as they were carrying him out because, you know, they didn't know if he was alive or not. So the HBO cameras are following the paramedics. He's not moving on the stretcher. They're going up the stairs. And then all of a sudden, one of the paramedics lost his footing and he almost fell over and the stretcher tipped over. And my father was falling out of the stretcher. And right that moment, he woke up and he yelled, "What the hell are you doing? Where is everybody?" And it was all on HBO camera while this was happening. It was the first time we knew he was alive.
Yeah. Dino, I was there that night. I remember that. That was amazing. And I end up, we're all the press. We end up going right into the press room and we were all moving fast and just to get out of that area. But I remember that whole thing with your father, and that was some night.
You know,
What happened? What happened in the corner? Because Golota kept landing low.
Yeah, he had a history of that.
But what happened? Do you remember? Or
Well, he obviously kept hitting him low blows, and ultimately he got disqualified. And as soon as the ref stopped the fight, about 100 people, in all honesty, were 𝗥𝗢𝗨𝗡𝗗 people, fans, people that were in the ringside section. They just rushed the ring and started going after 𝗥𝗢𝗨𝗡𝗗. And it was scary. It was really scary. And then once they started rushing the ring, all hell just broke loose. But they basically went after 𝗥𝗢𝗨𝗡𝗗 because of what he was doing with the low blows. And you know, the interesting thing about that is back then, that event changed boxing security around the country.
Yes.
Because back then they used to give out ringside credentials, ring passes to anybody. And after that happened, first of all, the Garden wouldn't do another show for, I think it was over a year, maybe even longer, but that changed ringside security at every major venue because they started severely restricting ringside and ring passes, photo credentials, things like that. And it really had a major effect on things. But I remember, one other thing when that was happening, when we pulled my father out of the ring and dragged him out underneath the ropes, it was funny as hell. You know, HBO was broadcasting the fight, and back then George Foreman was one of the announcers. As we're pulling my father out of the ring, I'm looking underneath the ring apron, and George Foreman is hiding underneath the ring because of riot going on. And I said, "George, what are you doing?" He said, "I'm not going out there. I want to get out of this. I want to get out of this arena, but I'm not going out there until it calms down." He was literally crouching underneath the ring, hiding under the ring because he was afraid of what was going on in the ring. It was actually pretty funny watching, you know, big George Foreman hiding under the ring from everything.
That's a great story, Dino. Great story.
Yeah. Oh God, I don't know if you remember in Caesar's Palace, the 𝗥𝗢𝗨𝗡𝗗 Holyfield fight, the Fan Man. I don't know if
Sure.
anyone was there.
Yeah, I was there that night, Dino.
Oh my God, Mauricio and Chuck, were you there?
no?
I don't think I was at that one. No,
That was
saw it on television.
one of the craziest things I ever seen. You know, they used to build the outdoor arenas in the Caesar's Palace parking lot for the big fights, and you know, there was the rematch of Holyfield-Bowe 1. And you know, all of a sudden, I think it was the 6th or 7th round. I'm kneeling on the neutral corner stairs watching the fight. And I remember a gentleman from Caesar's Palace, a guy who used to be in charge of entertainment and did all the fights.
Rose.
No, it wasn't Rich Rose. It was another guy, a guy named Tom Pilkington.
Okay.
Like the head of entertainment at Caesar's Palace. And he was a close friend. And me and him were sitting there watching the fight on the neutral stairs together. And then all of a sudden, in the middle of a round, he taps me on the shoulder, real nonchalantly, casually, not excited or nothing. And hey, look at this. Look up, look at this clown. And all of a sudden, this guy on a parachute is like maybe 50 feet up in the air above the ring, coming down to the ring. And he was headed right towards us on an angle. He was coming in from the other side of the ring. And he was that we were sitting on the opposite neutral corner of that picture. And if he hadn't gotten the parachute, when he got towards the ring, the parachute got hung up on the lighting grid. And that kind of broke his fall. And if he hadn't got caught up on the lighting grid, he was headed right for me and Tom in that corner. But it was just crazy. It was unbelievable. It's wonderful that you have these pictures, man. It brings back memories you never forget. But it was a crazy night.
I was at the bite fight. That was a scary night.
A lot of Tyson. When Tyson
Yes.
Eddie Vander's ears off. Yeah.
That was the riots in the ring and also out on Las Vegas Boulevard. And that's the same night that the rapper 𝗧𝗪𝗏𝗡𝗏 was killed.
Right. Correct. Yeah. Yeah. I remember when Tyson
Crazy night.
When Tyson bit Evander's ear, you couldn't see it too much on TV, but what he did was he spit the piece of the ear out. He spit it and it went, on the ring mat. Mills Lane, the referee, picked it up and threw it towards the corner to get it out of the middle of the ring. Because at that moment, the fight still was going on. Mills hadn't stopped it. So he sort of like just brushed it off to the side of the ring. And the piece of the ear went right towards Holyfield's corner. My brother-in-law, Tommy Brooks, who was Tyson's trainer at the time, picked it up and put it in his corner jacket pocket. And he had it in his corner jacket pocket and he forgot about it. And then later on, I think it was in the dressing room, well, when the commissioner, one of the doctors came back to the dressing room, he remembered it and he gave it to the ringside physician or one of the doctors or paramedics that was dealing with Evander's ear. And they actually preserved it. And ultimately, I think they put it in a jar of alcohol or something, and they actually saved it. And when Evander first got his plastic surgery, they actually were able to put part of the real ear back onto him when they did the plastic surgery.
Wow. Dino, I've got a question for you. You mentioned about we talked about Caesar's Palace with the parachute and all that, and I was there that night, and other fights at Caesar's Palace. Over the years, of course, great fights at Madison Square Garden, the MGM, you name the places, great fights, a lot of excitement. Something about Caesar's Palace during that time, the electricity for a heavyweight or middleweight, whatever title fight it was, during the day, walking by that pool to then go to where the outside arena was, and the buzz in the air when people are pulling up in front of Caesar's Palace and everybody's watching who's getting out of the car, and then all the different promoters and different ones and the writers all getting ready for so many hours to go before the main event, before the fights would start. And then just being in that outside arena and the electricity in the air, to me, my opinion, those were some of the most exciting times that create a lot of energy. Where would you say, of all the fights that you've been involved in, was perhaps in an arena like that or something different? Where would you say the most exciting arena was during what times?
Well, yeah, and you're right. Back then in the, the 80s and 90s, Caesar's Palace were really the centerpiece of big fights. Because if you remember, there was a period of time where Madison Square Garden didn't do boxing shows. They shut down for a while, and they started getting back involved in the late 90s. But Caesar's Palace was the main place for big fights, big boxing, celebrities. It was the only casino, the Las Vegas Hilton used to do a lot of fights. But they did up to a certain level. They only fit like 6,000 or 7,000 people, if I remember, in the big convention center. But Caesar's Palace was really the place. It was like the 𝗧𝗪𝗏𝗡𝗏 was to New York City years ago. Everybody went there, and the big fights, they weren't just a fight. an event, and they weren't just a boxing event. It was a sports and entertainment event. And you're right, the atmosphere there was unbelievable. And you know, for a long time, the biggest fights in the world occurred there. You know, unfortunately, over time, Caesars got out of the boxing business, which was disappointing. But now they have some great venues in Vegas. But there, and in all honesty, Madison Square Garden for a big fight. And you know,
Dino, 50 in the 50s and 60s, Mecca. That during that period, some of the greatest fighters of all time, of course. I know Basilio and Robinson, for instance, and you had a heavyweight fight with Joe Louis or something, and everybody would come in with their fur coats, and I mean, it was an unbelievable scene. So that's how Madison Square Garden really got the reputation of being the place. And you hear fighters all the time, I want to fight Madison Square Garden, and now Brophy's got the ring.
That's right. Well, that was always the dream, as we know. Any boxer in the history of boxing, the dream was to fight in New York City at Madison Square Garden and to fight the championship fight there. So we're very fortunate to have that ring that was from 1925 to 2007 of the historical history of boxing to be sitting in Canastota. That ring is enjoyed by the champions and by the fans. But yeah, the Madison Square Garden, #1, but different times over the years when it passed through different areas, when Caesar's Palace had those moments, they were something. I remember Dino with main events, it was during their time where they were putting on the biggest bouts, and they happened to be at Caesar's Palace. So that's why I wanted to bring that up to Dino. Those were glorious days for him and main events.
Yeah, it was great.
And now you got the big arenas in England and Germany.
Yeah, the O2, right. Great places, Wembley. Yeah, I mean, look, I agree with Chuck about ultimately there's no place like the atmosphere in Madison Square Garden for a big fight. I mean, it's just the buzz, the electricity, and
to this day.
Well, places like Caesar's Palace in the old days and other great venues, you know, they had some great events that you'll never forget. You know, the celebrity aspect, it was great and everything was nice, but in the Madison Square Garden, it just seemed like there was more hardcore, pure boxing people there. And the atmosphere, you know, I could have imagined how it was. I never was there in the old days of the old garden where they had the smoke-filled rooms and everything. You could see the cloud of smoke above. See that in old highlights and stuff. I mean, it must have been unbelievable back then. But yeah, the garden and a big fight, the buzz, the atmosphere, there's nothing like it. Nothing like it.
Well, Dino, I'll say this, those are all big fights, the buzz, but sometimes in the smallest atmosphere, you can get a lot of buzz. And I'll use this as an example. If I had a dream right now and I could just say what that dream could be, is be to sit around a table with your father, Angelo Dundee, and Bert Sugar. And to me, that would be the buzz, the excitement in my own little world, in boxing's world. If any boxing fan could sit with those three and have a conversation, listen to those three talk, it would just be unbelievable. They were just gems.
Yeah, I'll tell you, Ed, in all honesty, I lived that a few times. I mean, there were many times with my father, Angelo, Bert, and some other old characters. You know?
Exactly.
Eddie Futch, throw Eddie Futch into that mix.
There's so many. I mean, you know, Mickey Duff from Britain. When those guys used to get around the table, and it was just magic. It really was. And you know, you look back, some of the stories, you know, you just laugh. You laugh for a couple of days after you hear them. And those were. When you think about it, in times like this where you have time to reflect, it really hits you. It really does, in a good way.
Yeah. Dino, you got a lot of great stories. Of course, you know the history with you and your family and everything that you've done, and it's endless. The stories could be endless. This could go on for hours and hours and hours, and we'd have to do another show because it's is just unbelievable. It's the people that you've been around, the promotions you put on, and the stories you could have one after another, were just unbelievable.
I
Yeah,
would like to ask Dino, on all of you, which is the best fight you ever been in?
Been or seen?
No,
well,
the idea
what-
is been there, been there.
How
Yeah,
about both?
I mean-
Both. Your
I mean-
favorite fight all time and your favorite fight that you were there.
Can I start off?
Sure.
The best one I ever, let's see. The one I've seen was Basilio Robinson. When Basilio's eye was closed in like the second or third round, Eddie could tell me which
You were
round.
there?
No, I saw it on television.
Oh.
I was a kid. So that one, Eddie, what year would that have been?
That was 1957 Fight of the Year, or that was the actually the rematch the in Chicago.
Oh, no, I was just 2 years out of the Navy. I came out of the Navy in 1955. Yeah. So that then the was 𝗥𝗢𝗨𝗡𝗗𝗏, which is without a doubt the most brutal fight has ever seen. I mean, those unbelievable.
How about you, Dino?
Those are my two.
Obviously 𝗥𝗢𝗨𝗡𝗗𝗡, it ranks up there as one of the greatest fights ever on anybody's list. On a personal level, and I'll tell you, I've also seen some of the greatest fights in history in small little club shows that nobody ever even knew. 4-round, 6-round fights that were like Hagler-Hearns, with two unknown kids who were fighting their heart out for a couple $100. So those fights, always stick in your mind. But on a personal level, I think the greatest fight that I remember, maybe because I was younger, and maybe it's because it was when I was first starting to get interested in boxing through my father and my family and my uncle. I always go back to the Ali Frazier fight at the Garden. Joe Frazier was personally one of my favorite fighters in history, and he was one of the first fighters I truly followed. And obviously the great Muhammad Ali and the anticipation with that fight. I can only think about, it's hard to even imagine how big that fight would be in today's media market with the social media, the television reach and everything. But I remember I think it might've been the first big fight my father ever took me to. And in those days, we used to go to movie theaters to watch it on closed circuit.
Yep.
And I'll never forget, we went to a movie theater in Paterson, New Jersey. It was the first big fight I ever watched live. I can remember watching fights, listening to fights before that on the radio. That's, believe it or not, back in the 70s.
Don Dumphy.
Yeah, but and the fights that led up to that Ali Frazier fight, I remember listening to on radio what Jimmy Ellis and Jimmy Young and some other fighters. But anyway, so I remember going to the movie theater with my father, my brother, I think my cousin may have come to watch that Ali Frazier fight. And that might be the one punch I remember more than any other punch in my life, is when Frazier knocked Ali down with a left hook in the last round. And there was so much drama with that leading up to that round. It's just the one fight that always comes to mind that had an effect on me, because it was probably when I first started, knowing and feeling that boxing was in my blood.
And you, Ed?
Well,
How about the fight, the live fight? You don't want to say any
What?
That you've been there.
your favorite Ali Frazier one, but your favorite that you attended.
Yeah, I mean, look, I was at the Castillo-Corrales fight. We actually had someone on the undercard. That was an unbelievable fight. But maybe going back a little further, there was a fight that we did at Caesar's Palace, actually. It was not in the big arena in the parking lot. They used to do some other shows in the tennis pavilion at Caesar's Palace. There was a pavilion in the back that used to fit about 5,000 people. They did a lot of fights there too. It was when Evander Holyfield moved up to heavyweight. He was the cruiserweight champion. He moved up to heavyweight, and he fought against Michael Dokes. Michael Dokes was a former world champion, very, very good heavyweight fighter. That fight, Evander against Michael Dokes, was probably the most exciting and one of the most brutal boxing matches I've ever been at. And I don't know how many people saw it. I think it was on HBO. I'm pretty sure, or maybe it may have been on Showtime, but boy, that fight, Michael Dokes had Evander knocked out at least 3 or 4 times. And Evander, as everybody knows, Evander, you know, his reputation and history is to come back from being hurt. And it was just unbelievable, the back and forth I remember in that fight. It was brutal, brutal.
And you, Ed? What about
Well,
you?
I would have to say, like Dino, is Ali Frazier for personal wise, that meant perhaps the most, because maybe, again, you know, like Dino, my age, I was young. I was in love with boxing as a kid. And although I didn't get to go to see it on a closed circuit, I had to listen to it on a round by round report on the radio from my bedroom. I always remember being kneeled down and listening to the radio, waiting till the next round was over. They come back and give a report of how that round went. And, you know, to me, I always, like Dino, I admired Joe Frazier. I liked his style. You know, I was a Joe Frazier fan. But like everybody then, whether you were a Muhammad Ali fan then or shortly after, everybody loved Muhammad Ali. But I was a Joe Frazier fan, and that round by round report meant so much to me in my bedroom. I just, you know, think of it to this day. And back then, you were an Ali fan or you were a Joe Frazier fan, and there was a lot of people afterwards that didn't talk to each other because, you know, who won that fight. And my friend in school, he was a Ali fan. I was a Joe Frazier fan. Well, we didn't talk to each other for about 6 months after that fight. I mean, that's how that was. There was my brother, an older brother, and a friend of his. They had a little bet at a bar room, and they said whoever loses. My brother's a Joe Frazier fan. His friend was an Ali fan, and whoever was going to lose, they had to crawl across the floor to the other person and buy them a drink. That was like they were betting on it. Well, I mean, there was a lot of crazy things happening during that time. You were a Joe Frazier fan or you were a Muhammad Ali fan. So for me, that round by round report as a young kid listening to it and then going to school the next day and looking at my friend, and well, he was upset that Ali won. I was happy that Joe Frazier won. We somehow didn't talk to each other for a little while. And but the fight that I say was one of the most exciting for it to be at, when we talk about Caesar's Palace, I was there for Hearns and Hagler in '85. And, you know, you sat down for a little bit, then you stood up when a couple punches started being thrown. I don't think I sat back down maybe for a couple seconds throughout that fight. Everybody was standing all the way through. So that was the one to be at for me, Caesar's Palace, '85. You just stood up and you really never sat down, and it was unbelievable. So the personal one was Joe Frazier Ali. And that big anniversary is coming up next year, the 50th anniversary. Mm-hmm. And that's how long ago it was. And so those are the two for me.
The best fighter for you, the one that you follow. I don't want the best fighter in boxing, but the one that you really enjoy. Chuck, who was the best fighter for you?
Sugar Ray Robinson.
And Dino?
I'm biased. My favorite fighter of all time was Pernell Whitaker.
Oh, Ed.
Well, I would, yeah, it's we all train. It's a toss up. There's so many, but I always liked Alexis Arguello, the style of Alexis Arguello and what he could do in that ring. So, you know, he's right up there with me of, you know, one of the great technicians, Alexis Arguello.
And a great gentleman.
Yes.
Yeah, it was great fighter, great person.
I like the way he treated Boom Boom Mancini after their fight, the respect he showed.
Who was the craziest fighter you ever met?
Me?
Yes.
Vinny Paz. Vinny is, I've been around him a lot. He is a real character. And if you saw the movie, well, I'll tell you what, to have that doctor take that crown off and unscrew the screws with no pain medicine. And if you'll remember, he had his arms on the wooden chair and it was so painful, he ripped the arm off of the chair on one side. That was unbelievable, and that was true.
Dino?
I think the craziest fighter I ever knew was Pryor. Aaron was a terrific fighter. One of the most exciting fighters I've ever seen in my life. Super talent and so exciting. If he didn't have personal problems with abuse and stuff, I think he would have gone down as one of the great fighters ever. His first fight with 𝗥𝗢𝗨𝗡𝗗 was another one of the greatest fights I remember. But Aaron Pryor was a little out there, and you never knew what to expect from him.
Ed?
Well, I never really been asked that question. Who's the craziest fighter? So I'm really not ready to answer that because I haven't put enough thought to it. But I'll say this: I'll agree with the other two that those two were definitely very surprising at times. And Vinny's done some amazing things, crazy things, and Aaron Pryor was quite an amazing person and crazy at times.
But it's not necessarily crazy. It's a showman, a character, someone that captures your attention.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it's a good question. Like Macho Camacho, you felt
Yes.
Yeah.
when
That was a good
Camacho
one.
was there, you
Macho.
know,
Oh,
Eccentric.
eccentric, yeah.
as a promoter, Macho Camacho, first of all, when he was first coming up in the New York Golden Gloves and amateurs, and when he first turned pro, he was one of the most talented boxers I ever saw in my life. Hand speed, movement, but as a showman and as a promoter, he was such a pleasure. I was lucky to promote some of his fights for a while, and boy, he was like a promoter's dream. He was a promoter's dream, and again, like Mauricio said, he did some unexpected things that that caught you by surprise too.
Yeah.
One time
Definitely.
we were, Chuck, remember when we were in the Night of Champions in Cancun, 2006, there was this hurricane that hurt Cancun. It was finished. So we did the Night of Champions. We got 98 world champions to go to Cancun and celebrate with a variety of things. There was a boxing event. There was a car parade, talent show. And then the day before the dinner, it was a Monday. So my father went out and he got everybody, let's go all out to the pool area to take a beautiful picture with a beach on the back. And they're all Lennox Lewis, Floyd Mayweather, Chavez, Holyfield, everybody was there. So they're about to take the picture, and then someone screams, "Hey, what about me?" So everybody looks up. It's Macho Camacho screaming from his window. So my father says, "Okay, we'll wait." And what he does, he gets out of the window, starts going down from the side of the hotel. So he didn't take the elevator, he just went down and joined the picture. It was a memorable time. Incredible.
Talking about Macho Camacho, and we were talking about Vinny Pazienza. We did a show up in Providence, Rhode Island with Vinny, and we had already contracted for a fight between Vinny Paz and Macho Camacho. It was going to be the next fight. So we did this fight in the Providence Civic Center with Vinny, and we brought Macho Camacho up there to help promote the fight. And we were doing the show, and during Vinny's fight, you know how you have the round girls coming in between rounds and stuff. In one of the rounds, all of a sudden, Macho Camacho jumps up and grabs one of the round girls' round signs and and he literally took his pants off, and he started parading around the ring with the round side in his underwear and taunting Vinny Paz like in between rounds. And it was pretty comical when he did that. I mean, that's how Macho was. He just did spur of the moment things like that.
I'd like
Mauricio.
I'd like to
Mauricio.
tell one story on Camacho, if I could.
You know, talking about the gathering of champions, the greatest ever was the convention at the Mirage, where we had 122 champions on stage at one time. And it set a record for the most champions ever gathered at one time.
Yeah, very, very nice. 2014.
Huge. And you know, we had all of the great ones on that stage. It was just incredible. And so many things have happened at conventions, like Sugar Ray Leonard and Hagler finally embracing each other. Evander Holyfield and Tyson embracing each other, where, you know, for years they wouldn't talk to each other or what have you because of the incident. And so the conventions, and it was wonderful to see these champions, and same thing at the Hall of Fame, Eddie, when you see these champions together, and talking to each other, athlete to athlete, and telling the stories between each other. And by the way, I take this opportunity, Eddie, to thank you so much for you and Grace and everybody up in Canastota, how kindly you folks have treated me over all the years I've been going up there.
I think Ed has a story about Macho, right?
Mhm.
Well, I do. I'm glad Mauricio, you brought his name up, because definitely when it was asked who's one of the crazy kind of fighters that done a lot of crazy things, I couldn't think of one, so I just agreed with the others. But when you said Camacho, then of course, naturally, Camacho's got to fit right in there. He's done a lot of wild and crazy things. And I'll give you one little story. In Canastota during a Hall of Fame weekend, that we used to have a breakfast of champions with the fire department. We used to host it. So we bring the champions there, and the fans would come and they'd have their breakfast and then get some autographs from the different fighters. And it was on Sunday morning. And so Camacho is having his breakfast and he's having fun with the firemen and telling stories and getting them laughing. And he sees the different uniforms of the fire department hanging up on the wall. And he sees the helmets that are hanging up there. And one says Canastota Fire Chief, the big red helmet that they wear, the hat. And he looked at it and he says, he puts it on, everybody's taking pictures of him. And then he wants to put on a fireman's jacket. And he says, I'm going to be a fireman in my next fight, come out with the outfit of being a fireman, because he'd always change his outfit every time. And it was always to the extreme. So the fireman said, sure. And so the fire chief looked and said, you never let that go out of this place. But for you, if you want to use it for a fight, we love boxing. It's yours. Go ahead and take it from Canastota. And sure enough, the next fight he had, when the TV cameras, and I think it might have been on Showtime, I can't recall for sure, but they're walking him from the dressing room to the ring, as they always do with a camera. And here he comes with a Canastota fireman's outfit on and the hat that said Canastota Chief on it, walking to the ring. It was the craziest thing. And the Canastota Fire Department was so proud that then he got into the ring and he's acting like he's a fireman. And he was wearing the Canastota Fire Chief's hat with a whole outfit on. And that was his thing that night, being a fireman. So just crazy stories.
That's his son giving the speech, remember?
Yes.
Yeah.
Junior, with the mother.
Yes, exactly. That was quite a moment.
Yeah, actually, Macho was one of the originators of the crazy costumes coming into the ring. And Ed's right. He used to change it every fight.
So would you put 𝗧𝗔𝗟𝗞𝗦 in that category also?
As far as craziness,
Yeah, extravagance.
you know, I think he was more of a showman. I think Macho was legitimately eccentric. I would say Nassim more of a clever, you know, flamboyant showman type of guy, but I think he was a little more grounded than Macho.
He was the most unorthodox fighter ever to enter the ring, without a doubt.
Look at the picture.
Yes, you have it. Wow.
It's great that you have these photos.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. Yeah. That made Canastota proud when he walked into that ring and he wore that Canastota Fire Chief's hat. That was amazing. It all started.
You know, Mauricio, your people do such an unbelievable job bringing up stuff like this. It's incredible.
It's great. God bless you.
No, it's because of you who give us the opportunity to be close to the boxing community of the world, and I'm very, very thankful to all of you. It's been incredible. We're past the hour, and I hope we can do this again.
I'd love to.
If not by computer, but live. We have to see each other soon. This will pass. Life will resume. We will all learn many different ways of how this has and will change our lives. But there's nothing more sacred than friendship. And you three are very special. And I cannot thank you enough for accepting our invitation, and very much looking forward to seeing you very soon.
Thank you so much, Mauricio. Chuck, Ed, Victor, it's great seeing you. Mauricio, keep up the great work. You're an inspiration to the whole industry. I mean that.
Thank you.
Thank
so
you,
much.
Mauricio. And all you guys and your loved ones, stay safe.
Thanks to everybody. This was wonderful getting together and just talking boxing, and so many different stories that came up, and some things I picked up on I didn't know, and now I know, and they're funny stories and memorable stories. So this was just a wonderful time. It's always a good time. It's needed during these times especially, and I really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much. Let's have a great week. God bless. Gracias, Victor.
Bye-bye.
Gracias, Mauricio. Thanks,
God bless.
everybody. This was round 19 of the WBC Talks. Stay home, stay safe. Thanks for joining us, and thank you very much to all of you.
Aloha.